extemporaneously. Mark, did you want to say something?
Would you like an introduction?
I think everybody knows me, right? Does everybody know who I am? No, you're just here because it's a nice, beautiful.
You're not, you got people that don't know.
No, but I expect that. Well, I just see a few things.
Well, tonight we are proud to have with us once again local author June McInerney, who's been very busy creating a fictionalized version of historic Phoenixville through her writing, sort of an alternate Phoenixville universe, I guess. No, okay. She recently published book number 5 in her series of historical novels set in Phoenixville, Colonial Theater, which takes place during the Roaring '20s. Copies of the book are available for sale tonight in the back afterwards. Cash or check? Cash or check. Okay. Originally from New York, June has also authored a number of collections of short stories, volumes of poetry, and the books and lyrics for musicals that have been produced across the country. Please welcome now the resident historical novelist of Phoenixville, June McInerney.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maestro. That's a reference to his gigs on Saturday on WRTI. If you don't get it's Saturday. He's wonderful. He's just really wonderful. All right. Well, good evening again, everybody. Thank you for coming out. It's a lovely spring evening, and the sun is just setting. And so here we are at my third appearance in Carnegie Hall. No, Carnegie. It's my third presentation, and they say that 3 is a charm, so here we are. Colonial Theater. How did I start this? I wrote 4 other novels of Phoenixville prior to this, and was beginning, believe it or not, to run out of places to write about, because I pretty much covered most of the history of Phoenixville from 1870, maybe even before that, to almost the present day. And I was driving down Bridge Street and had the words of one of my fans, William Zabo, who he emails me every once in a while and says, "When's your next book coming in?" And he came to pick up a copy of one of my books, and he said, "You've run out of things to write about." And I said, "No, I haven't." And so we brainstormed. So he said, "Well, you've got 2 options. You've got the Colonial Theater and the library." And I said, "Okay, let me think about that." So I'm driving down Bridge Street, and I see Colonial Theater. I'm going, yeah, why not? So I contacted Mary Foote, and I met with her, and I said, "Mary, I need your permission to write a novel about the Colonial Theater." I mean, that's being respectful, and I always try to do that, because I didn't want to write anything in the novel that she wouldn't approve of, right? She was the executive director at the time, and she gave me her blessing. So, that's what I did. But when you write a novel, you need a hook. And a hook is something that ties all of the characters and the descriptions together. And I was looking at the history of the Colonial Theater, and while it's kind of exciting, there wasn't to me anything that really sparked, okay? And my previous novels, those of you that have read them, kind of a mystery. Not so much the prisoner's portrait, except for the mystery of why F.W. painted the portrait. I just found out his name, by the way. It's Franz Wendt, W-E-N-D-T. Anyway, the Schuylkill Monster was a tongue-in-cheek about what's known as a cryptoid, and the cryptoid is a fictitious character, i.e. the Loch Ness Monster. When I did Columbia Hotel, that was a murder mystery. And Phoenix Ho's Hook and Ladder was about an arsonist, okay? So I got getting good at writing mystery novels, I hope. And so now I'm looking around for my next crime to commit on paper. And I noticed that next to the Colonial Theater was a building, now part of the Colonial Theater, that says National Bank of Phoenixville across the facade. We're all familiar with that. That used to be the Daily Republican building, but it was first a bank. And I thought, wow, a bank, a robbery. So I get online, and I'm noodling around, and I'm on, you're from Phoenixville, and somebody commented me back and said, did you know that the Springs City Bank was robbed in 1921? I said, no. So he sends me, and I'm just going to flip through right here. He sends me these pictures of this character who was head of the gang, okay? And I said, that's my novel. So now let me go back to the beginning and I'll walk you through all that. So here's the Colonial Theater a number of years ago. On Bridge Street, it's probably the center of our arts and cultural community here in Phoenixville with the new people who are now running it. We've got some great movies, and it's not one of my haunts, but I do go there occasionally. When I first moved here to Phoenixville 43 some odd years ago, I would go there, and one of my favorite movies is Out of Africa. And I remember seeing it at the Colonial, and I was like, wow, this brings everything just, Robert Redford, up on the big screen. And I just thought, wow, okay, so now, this was a history of the Roaring Twenties. I'm going to assume that you all know about the Roaring Twenties. And learned about it in school, read about it. There's a brief history about it in the book.
Try it and see if it plays.
What? Try and see if it will play?
See if it plays.
You gotta be kidding. It's playing, but there's no sound.
Okay. It's not playing on the screen.
No, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's just,
okay.
it was basically filler. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Back on track. All right. From a line from one of my favorite characters in one of my favorite old sitcoms. Picture this. Phoenixville, 1901. Okay. Harry Brownback had a dream. Here he is, Harry Brownback, in his earlier years and again in the 1920s. Now, Harry was ambitious and hardworking, and he soon rose to prominence in the community. His family, I understand, started 7 Stars Inn. Okay. So he came to Phoenixville, and he became the secretary and treasurer of the Griffith Smith Hill Pottery, which produced the now collectible and famous Majolica, which is on display at the Historical Society. They've got some really fine pieces there. Unfortunately, in 1901, a fire burned down the factory, and coupled with another financial setbacks, Harry and the rest of the board of directors were forced to close it down. And they made that painful decision. And they sold the land at the bottom of Church Street. As we all know, that's now St. Peter's residence for senior citizens, right? Out of work, Harry Brownback now had time on his hands to realize his life's dream and his life's ambition. And that was basically to pursue the world of theatrics. And he had contacts with theaters in Philadelphia. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to bring to Phoenixville top quality productions that would satisfy, in his own words, satisfy New Yorkers, but at a fraction of the cost to theater patrons. So at a time when Phoenixville was a thriving industrial town, it was known as the gateway to Valley Forge. It had a population back then of about 2,000. So Brownback, with the money he got from the Majolica factory, from the sale of the land, purchased 2 adjoining storefronts on Bridge Street. And these storefronts were owned by a family called Miller. And he opened what he first called in 1903 Brown's Colonial Opera House. And it cost $30,000. It's a hefty sum back then. It's a hefty sum now, isn't it? So the sketch at the right is a postcard of it. Just to let you know what Phoenixville was like, Bridge Street was unpaved back then. It was cinders on the sidewalks, and hard-packed dirt. And there was a fire wagon drawn by horses to wet down the dirt so it wouldn't get on people as they're walking on the sidewalks or into houses or storefronts. But the storefronts there were a fishmonger, a furrier, a paper hanger, a bargain 5 and 10 cent store, a tailor, a confectioner, a jeweler, a hotel, a hardware store, and an assortment of dry goods stores. So business was probably booming on Good Street back then. Now, the first stage show was a musical, and that was held on Saturday, September 5th, 1903, and that starred internationally known actor Fred W. White. The first movie presentation at the Colonial Theater was, of course, a silent film. It was on Saturday, December 19th of the same year, and it was a series of 4 one-reelers that lasted 40 minutes each. Some of the theatrical milestones of the Colonial's early history included D.W. Griffith's controversial 2-hour Civil War film, The Birth of a Nation. This was shown in 1915, and across the country, it spawned the rapid rise of fascist sentiment, including the growth of the Ku Klux Klan in the United States. Actress Mary Pickford, that's Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford visited her friend, she was friends with Harry Brownback, on her way to the Rajah Theater in Reading. And in 1916, this gentleman, a well-known magician, Thurston, was also a good friend of Mr. Brownback, and he performed at the Colonial. But perhaps the most famous act back then was Mr. Houdini, who on stage in 1917 worked his way out of a milk can that was locked, chains, and a safe that was locked in chains that were locked. And I like Houdini, and I've always thought, gee, well, we need to be here to see that. In 1926, the Colonial presented its last stage show, Jerome Kern's Very Good Eddie, which opened on Broadway the year before. And the first talkie, The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson, and that was shown in 1928. And I have a clip of that with Al Jolson singing Tootsie. Again, we don't have any sound, so I try anyway. That's okay. Sorry about that. Here's the Colonial Theater proceeding with an organ in front of the stage. Now, even though we tried to watch a clip of a movie with sound back in the 20s, there was no such thing as the talkies until 1928. So all of the movies, they were called flickers back then because of the lights that flickered on the screen. All of the movies again were silent, and the silent movies were accompanied by live piano and sometimes an orchestra. So to make the entertainment experience more pleasurable for his audiences, Mr. Brownback purchased a used Wurlitzer organ and installed it in front of, and if you can see that, he installed it in front of the stage. And later on, there was a gentleman named Howard Cohen, C-O-A-N-E, who eventually purchased the theater from Mr. Brownback, but he improvised a platform on which the organ sat, and the platform rose and disappeared under the stage, depending on what performances were being staged. Okay. Now, after the success of The Jazz Singer, of course, everybody in Hollywood got on board, and there were more and more flickers films that had sound. And I have a flick of Charlie Chaplin, and I don't know if we can play this silently. I just think we just have security problems here. Okay, anyway, it was really kind of cute. I like Charlie Chaplin too. Well, it's a little brief history of the 1920s to give you a flavor for what the book was like, to get a feel for, you know, when you read a novel, it's nice to know the background, right? It's nice to know what it's about. even though, as I say, in the novel I do include some history. Not only were there movies at the Colonial back then, but local talent got into the act, and the local Kiwanis put on a production of The Mikado, and they would do that every year to raise funds to fund local civic activities in the community. I kind of wish they'd do that again. That'd be fun. Okay. I'll talk to John Keenan about that. Now you have a bit of a background, so let's delve into the actual novel. Okay, in writers speak, there's a thing called a tell and a reveal. Two things. A tell is kind of a clue, and it tells you what's coming up, and a reveal reveals what that clue solution is. The tell here is that the bank, the National Bank of Phoenixville, was right next door to the Colonial Theater. Right? And according to the Sanborn map, it's very hard to see, I know, there was an alley. This is a paper alley. It doesn't really exist. It didn't exist back then. But according to a friend of mine who's an expert on this, sometimes they would do Sanborn maps to show paper streets. And I don't know why they did that. They just did. But I took a look at this and I said there was an alley between the bank and an alley and the Colonial Theater. Well, a plot began forming in my mind. Now, remember I told you about the bank robbery in Spring City. Well, I went to the Historical Society and I had a date and I started looking up and I found these articles about this gang, and they came from Chicago and they came all over Phoenixville, not Phoenixville, I'm sorry, all over Philadelphia, and they began robbing banks. And they hit upon the idea of robbing the National Bank of Phoenixville, and I'm like, whoa, I'm going to write about this. Now, it was the Spring City Bank that they robbed, okay? But I write novels about Phoenixville, and so I said, oh, I'm just going to move that bank robbery, real time, real life, to the National Bank of Phoenixville. So, here's a good looking guy. This is Georgie Stewart. Georgie Stewart was the head of the gang, and he came from Chicago. And he is one of the main characters in my novel. I kind of described him in the novel and added to him the rest of his gang. These are real guys. Giovanni Gephardt and Joseph DiStefano and Mariano Paterno and George, the leader of the gang. And here's George's arrest card. Now, while the actual robbery occurred in Spring City, the Spring City Bank, which is now a private residence, by the way, they escaped to Phoenixville. And they rented a room on High Street from John and Mary Mason. That house is still there. It's now a large duplex. But they were in the boarding house counting their money, and somebody tipped them off to who the bank robbers were. And when one guy, okay, they're in the dining room and they're counting out their money, when they hear the police sirens coming down the street, up the street, one guy stuffed money in his pants. And he got up and he started running, and his pants were so full of money that he fell down. And it made it easy for the police to catch him. That's a true story. I couldn't make that up, but I used it in the novel. Tell you about the novel. You know, if I tell you this, you won't buy it. So the real robbers were the somewhat nefarious characters, and I added a fictitious member who was George's brother, Granger Stewart. Granger Stewart. Okay. All right. But the main protagonist is Constance Flower. Constance Flower came to me in a dream, and she has aspirations of being a movie star, just like Mary Pickford. This is the closest I can come to what I imagined her to look like, and this is what they wore in the 20s, right? But dressed as flappers. So I have a question for you before we go on. Does anybody know why they call them flappers? Anybody? Take a guess. No? No? Okay, well, back in the 1920s, women of fashion, i.e. those who were to become known as fashion, would wear galoshes with the buckles unbuckled, and they go galumphing down the street, and they would flap, and the guys would say, "Oh, there goes the flapper." And that's how they got their name. Also because if you take a look at the dresses when they did the Charleston, the dresses would flap. So there you go. A little bit of trivia for you. Well, anyway, Constance Flower wanted to be a movie star, in a great silent movie star. And her stage name, she decided was going to be Fleur Fixé. Right? Fleur being flower, Fixé, a friend of mine said, well, that's French for situated. Okay, and she wanted to be situated in Hollywood, so I took a little license and I thought Fleur Fixé, that's a cool name. Okay, what happened to the lost my slideshow here? So she winds up meeting George at a speakeasy here in Phoenixville. This is not the actual speakeasy, just a picture that I found. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Is that better? It's better. Okay. But in the novel, the speakeasy is hidden behind a dining room at the old mansion house. And George and his gang would go there for drinks and cocktails, and Constance, whose parents are very strict Baptists, rebelled a bit against that. And her friend Lily Lampese, who was based on a real character here in town, convinced her to go to Jack's joint to partake of the then infamous gin martini. Okay, so she goes and she meets George, and they meet, and George comes up, because he's in Phoenixville with the gang to rob the bank, right? And he finds out that Constance is the ticket taker at the Colonial Theater, which is the perfect job for somebody who wants to be in the movies, at least to start. He concocts an idea to have her aid and abet him in robbing the bank. So that's the crux of the novel. Let's see. I incorporated some things, the history of Phoenixville, as Mark had explained to you. Everybody knows that this is Church Alley, and I hate to bring up a sore topic, but I was writing about this the day that they were destroying it. That's November 7th of last year, and I just couldn't help but include this. The Belgian blocks are over 135 years old. They're just waiting now to be repurposed, but they came from the original Gay Street Bridge before the second one was built in 2025. Let's see. Now, when you write a mystery, especially a robbery, I had to learn by doing. Not that I actually went out and did that, and if I did, I'd be in jail right now, right? But I had to think like George Stewart. I had to think like the bank robbers, and I had to think like the police, and I had to think also like Constance Fleur. So I had all these characters floating around in my head and living in my living room, right, where I do most of my writing, and it got pretty crowded. So I had to quickly put them down on paper. And I had to come up with names, and I had to come up with characters. The High Street Gang is in homage to our High Bridge Gang who takes those wonderful photographs around town. Right, I had to do that. But I didn't use any of those their names. But anyway. So here I am, Constance Flower, aka Fleur Fixé, who ought to be in pictures, and I had to relive my dream of being well, that was in high school, not anymore, of being an actress, and her love of being at the Flickers, which I still love. So this was a pretty daunting task. And to top it off, I wrote it in the present tense, and styled in such a way that you as the reader is not so much reading, but actually watching a movie. And I was told that was kind of unique, and that brought a lot of fun into writing. And so I wrote it like it was playing out in front of me, across my French doors. There was a fake, imaginary screen. And here was this novel coming to fruition. A little bit about the Roaring Twenties. Warren G. Harding was involved in many scandals, included extramarital affairs and the infamous Teapot Dome scandal, which caused a lot of stress in his life. He eventually had a heart attack because of it. And now we have President Coolidge, who took over, and he spent most of his afternoons napping. And he said the business of America is business. And the proponent of the current events is Robert Flower, who was Constance's father, and he was also, he would spend his time sitting in their living room, reading the Daily Republican, and yelling and screaming at all of the politicians in the government. And he found himself involved as a vice president in charge of investments at the bank. He was involved with the bank robbery, and how he does that, I'm not going to tell you. What else can I tell you here? So, Phoenixville itself. This is a picture of the 200 block of Bridge Street in the early 1920s, and we're looking west towards Gay Street. I don't know if anything looks familiar. It really has changed. Some of the buildings are still there. Of course, very nicely renovated by a number of contractors. Here's the Gay Street Bridge in the early 1920s. Here's the first one when it was closed to vehicles. It was built for carriages and pedestrians, but in the 20s, we had flivvers, cars, and the bridge was not able to withstand, rapidly became deteriorating, and eventually there were holes in the wood planking. You could actually see down into the homes and the railroad tracks and part of the family underneath. During the 2 or 3 years it was raised and replaced by the second Gay Street Bridge, at which point the Belgian blocks were repurposed by the county to Church Alley. It was closed to just pedestrian traffic. Here's another photo of Bridge Street. And I'm not sure which direction we're looking. I think there's the Colonial Theater in the background. So, as you hopefully will discover, this novel, Colonial Theater, is quite different from my normal writing style of journalistic historical fiction. But I had lots of fun with it, and I hope that you have fun reading it. And I guess that's really all I have to say, except I could read you a couple of pages with that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Would you like me to do that? Okay. I guess I'll do it from here. I'll read you the trailer. Okay, when you go to a movie, before you see the movie, there's always a trailer. Well, that's the first part of the book. Okay, all right. She watches as the two well-dressed men wearing floppy-brimmed fedoras, one black, one brown, saunter across Bridge Street from the barbershop across the street and approach her booth. Hiya, Fleur, George smiles through the ticket window, doffing his hat to reveal his new haircut. A shaft of wavy chestnut hair drifts over his left eye. He brushes it away, then smiles enigmatically, as if mildly still surprised to see whom he met as the glamorous Fleur Fixé sitting in the tacky ticket booth. How you doing, babe? Did we have fun last night or what? Shh, not here. Huh? I mean, Constance looks around as if someone is secretly watching her. They don't know me as Fleur here. She winks. You catch my drift? Not sure, little darling, Granger pops up. I don't understand. Ain't you Fleur or is you not? Yes, but not here. Constance looks around the kiosk again. Please, just call me Miss Flower and buy a couple of tickets. Sure, kid, George says. He takes a $2 bill out of his wallet and passes it through the ticket window slot to Constance. We'll take 2. What's the matinee show, honey, bunch? The Sailor. That Clyde Cook fella, Granger asks, who continues to smile as Constance nods and passes change and the 2 25-cent tickets back. I heard we weren't all that good. Shut up and take your ticket, his brother says, shoving Granger toward the theater entrance. We'll see you later, Constance. Dear Miss Flower, we got plans to make, you know. Yeah, maybe I'll think about it, she sighs, nodding to the older couple waiting next in line. Enjoy the show, she calls after the good-looking brothers. She'd have to once again figure out a reasonable excuse to leave the house after dinner. Constance hates having to lie to her staunchly Baptist parents, but with 2 obviously well-heeled and attentive, handsome guys courting her, how could she refuse their invitation for later that night? Plans indeed, she chuckles under her breath as she sells a few more tickets for the matinee. We're just getting to know one another, especially George. So what plans of theirs would ever include me? She smiles at the next theater goer as she anticipates the next time at Jack's with George. What do they think they're going to do, she asks to no one in particular. Rob a bank? Okay, scene 2. He had refused at first during the interrogation after his arrest to again give his full name and address. He figured it was already on the intake card that Officer Campbell had filled out. Why should he give the information again? Frustrated, the Assistant District Attorney of Chester County paces back and forth in the small dark room on the first floor of Phoenixville's Borough Hall on Church Street. Says here you Georgie Stewart, age 30, that right? He pauses, looking at the manila card. You work as a machinist, that true? The suspect sits ramrod straight in the steel-backed chair, arms crossed tightly across his chest, thick lips pressed firmly together. Not a word would pass through them. Not yet. What's the matter, Stewart? Cat got your tongue? Silence is admission of guilt, you know, leastwise in my book. George Stewart slowly runs a calloused hand through his wavy chestnut hair, neatly parted to the left. A bushy lock skims over his temple and grazes the carefully close-cropped scalp just above his ear. He is vain and proud of the style, combing it frequently during the day, even now that he is in jail awaiting trial. He smiles wearily, but still does not say anything. Silence in his book was an admission not of guilt, but of annoyance, and this two-bit detective, big-shot government wannabe, was beginning to get on his nerves. H.R. McCowan waits for a few minutes, staring at the alleged criminal. Suddenly, his beefy hand slams down on the bare table between them. Damn you, will you talk? Stewart blinks in surprise, but does not flinch. He continues to smile, more so with his eyes than his mouth, insolently turned down slightly at the corners. McGowan tries another tact. I could have you put in prison indefinitely, he booms. Failure to comply with police procedures, resisting arrest. He lets that sink in for a few moments. The suspect remains silent, slowly blinking his eyes as if bored. It seems nothing faces him, which greatly annoys McCowan. Fine, you can play your game, he says, and then turns to leave. You can rot in this room, or back in your holding cell for all that I care. His fingers are almost touching the brass doorknob when Stewart begins to suffer and mumble. He is mildly claustrophobic. Long-term incarceration is his greatest fear. Even if spilling the beans on himself and the other members of his gang could put him behind bars for at least 2 to 5 years, he couldn't have that. He'd go batshit crazy in prison. What's that you said? I did it for her. Stewart's voice is a low baritone, soft, almost soothing, with a slight Polish accent. Aha, so you do speak. Who's the her? It's all for. The local floozy you fell in love with at Jack's joint? No, the suspect says. I got a wife, back in Chicago, he lies. She's starving. I needed the money. To send back to her? Yeah, that's right. To feed her, and let me guess, a starving kid too? He thinks of both his young son and baby daughter. Something like that. And you came all the way east to Phoenixville just to rob our bank? Aren't there any banks in Illinois? None that don't know me, Stewart smirks. He'd never tell the real reason he had originally come to town, even if it meant he'd probably be let to go scot-free. And the floozy, what's her name? The district attorney consults a small notebook. Flower, Constance Flower. She gets some of the money? No, never heard of her. Tall, dark lass, black hair, sultry eyes, worked at the Colonial Theater in the box office? No. Maybe you know her better as Fleur Fixet, the movie star? No, Stewart says, shifting his weight slightly in the chair, beginning to feel uncomfortable. Sweat beads up on his brow, under his arms. Damn it. No, she has nothing to do with me, he mumbles again, recalling dancing with her at Jack's joint, and then the last time sitting on the park bench. Finally to her, admitting he was married. He shakes the painful memory out of his mind and goes back to dancing till dawn. Her laughter, her innocence, her smile. Like I said, he continues, hoping to thwart the line of questioning, I don't even know her. Sure, Stewart, a likely story, but that's not what she says. He taps a sheaf of neatly typed papers. Says here you robbed the bank and then gave her money. Her exact words. Stewart lightly touches his forehead, then curls his upper lip into a snarl. How did they get to her? He frowns. What else has she told him? Despite the overwhelming evidence, the fact that he was caught red-handed trying to abscond with the stolen loot from the second robbery, he's now realizing that Constance Flower, who has sealed his fate. He angrily slams his fist on the table, startling the assistant district attorney. Bitch! Thank you. Yeah, does anybody have any questions, comments, anything you want to ask me?
Another question. On the newspaper article on the screen, it said 5 of the 6 bank robbers were caught. Was the 6th one out?
That's a good question. They don't know. They never found out. And I write about, we have 4 bank robbers. One in my novel got away, and I do tell his story, but that's, no. They returned the money by the way. They stole $11,500. And the Phoenixville police, yay, Phoenixville police, caught them and returned the money. Anybody else? Yes?
So Borough Hall was where on Church Street back then in the 20s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where the police station was? I don't know over there.
No, that's the second Borough Hall and police station. The first one back in the 20s and the late 1800s was on, I believe, maybe you're right, maybe it was the 200 block, across and down from the Historical Society, more towards that way. Okay.
Across from the
Yeah, I think so.
They say you were talking about the senior.
Yeah, I have a picture of it with a police car in front of it. I should have included, but yeah, you're right. Somebody back there? Somebody else? Is that it? Okay, well, it ran a bit shorter than I expected, folks. But thank you very much. Yes. Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Yes, I have a number in the pipeline. The one I'm working on now is called Miss Elmira's Secret Treasure, and guess where it's at? Right here in the library. You got it. And it was suggested by our own dear Mr. Mark Pinto. Elmira Wells Pennypacker was our very first librarian from 1898 to her early demise in 1916. And she is reputed, I hate to say this, I wouldn't say it anyway, she is reputed to be haunting the library. But I didn't want to write a ghost story. And I know there's a lot of people in Phoenixville, write a ghost story, write a ghost. As I came to learn about her, she was a very respected, very accomplished woman in our community, and to write such a novel about her would be disrespectful to her, not only to her, but to the library. And so I am writing a story about a secret treasure that she hides somewhere here, and I incorporate the early history of Phoenixville prior to the Civil War, in the novel, along with highlights of her life. And I should have something ready by the summer, I hope, if things go well. And Mark has already committed to have me come back to talk to you about it. What else is happening? I have also concurrently working on a book about alliances to Phoenixville, about the immigrant community here who seek asylum and are helped by Nina Guzman, the director of Alliances. It's a fictionalized account of what goes on. I also received a packet of short stories. I don't know if anybody here knows Harriet R. Swanson. She grew up at the Bell and Clapper, and it used to be a bed and breakfast. She sent me some stories, and I thought, gee, you know, she grew up in the 20s and 30s, and they're very interesting, and I thought I'd write a novella about that, so I'm working with her on that. And then I'm also thinking of writing a sequel to my first novel, 4030, about my father, who in the 1950s was the Duchess to the Anna Gould, who became the Duchess of Talleyrand. And I thought I'd do that. So I have a lot of things in the mix, a lot of things to keep me hopefully out of trouble, though I often can't avoid that. So that's what I'm working on. And I hope you enjoy reading them as much as I enjoy writing them. Anything else? I guess not. Then I thank you all for coming.
Thank you, June.